Ryan Rivas's Lizard People is a dark satire told through the voice of an unnamed narrator who believes that he himself is a lizard person. After an incident at his workplace, the man is sent to a resort for intensive therapy to begin wrestling with his perceived identity. Themes of race and white supremacy are interwoven in this deliciously twisted tale. Ryan Rivas joins us on the show to talk about his work on and off the page. He has solidified himself as a staple within Florida's literary scene, from his work with projects like Page 15 and There Will Be Words to creating his own publishing house. This September, Ryan marks a major milestone as Burrow Press celebrates 15 years of giving writers a home to set their words. Stay with us for another episode of the Vulgar Geniuses podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Vulgar Geniuses podcast. We are your hosts.
My name is Denny.
And I am Veronica. And this is a major interview for us today. We are joined by none other than, I feel like, the lit king of Orlando. None other than Ryan Rivas. Ryan Rivas is the author of Next Door in Colonial Town from Autofocus and Lizard People from 30 West. He is the publisher of Burrow Press and the coordinator of MFA Publishing at Stetson University's MFA of the Americas Creative Writing Program. A Macondo Writers Workshop Fellow, his work has appeared in The Believer, The Rumpus, Literary Hub, Best American Non-Required Reading 2012, and elsewhere. And today we are joined to speak with him. We're very excited to speak with him about his book, Lizard People, which was our pick for the month of January. Ryan,
welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me. It's a big deal for me too. So I'm happy to be here.
Well, we are happy. We're thrilled to be able to have this conversation. It's funny because, like, we just saw you last night at an event, and here we are getting ready to talk to you all about your books and your legacy and your life, all of the things,
all of the above.
Yes. So I'm going to pass it off to Jenny.
Because we want to get to know you. And I found out, because I'm also part of the CSI. No, I'm not. Don't cover me. That you also play the piano.
Not exactly. I have a piano in my house that someone who was moving gave to me because they didn't want to take it with them. And I can play some chords, but I wouldn't say that I play the piano. I actually have played the guitar since I guess I was 12, but I'm guessing you saw the piano on Instagram because that was how I would get myself to practice more. I would post a video and be like, "This sounds like crap. It'll be better next time."
When was the last time you played your guitar?
Less and less, but I play it a couple times a month. So.
Oh, okay. It gets some loving then. That's good.
So what is an Orlando gem that not many people know about?
Ooh, man. Well, everybody knows about the Vulgar Geniuses podcast and the Midnight Marauders Story Hour, your reading series. So I'll just brush past that one. But I do legitimately, not just BSing you. I do think y'all are a gem. So there's you all, and then I think there's a lot of gems here, actually. I think the literary community is a gem in general, but maybe something more specific. Although I haven't been in a while, I really love going to see events at Timucua, the Timucua White House, which is someone's actual house that has been turned into a music venue, a really high quality, incredible music venue. I think that's a great Orlando gem, to name one of many.
Yeah, that's a good spot. The very first time I went to, I think his name is Benoit Glazer, but I went
Hmm.
to his house was he lived in Hunters Creek, and a friend of mine who's a graffiti artist met him at Kinko's and saw him drawing, and he was like, "Would you like to do an art show?" And he was like, "Sure." And I get this call. He's like, "Why don't you come with me to this event that I'm doing?" I'm like, "Okay." And I walk into this space and I'm like, there are like trumpets and everything, like all on the wall, like art. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like the musical director for Cirque du Soleil.
Hmm.
I'm
Yep.
like, "What? What is this?" So I haven't been to his house since he's moved closer into Orlando, but he does amazing events, I've heard.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, they've become more, I mean, they've gotten bigger and bigger. They're an official 501c3 now. Um, but it's still kind of like the house still like, and the way they do things still embodies like that open door community spirit. So, in a way that's, I don't know, super authentic and, um, yeah, they're just doing it right. So,
How did photography find you?
mm, um, when smartphones got good at, taking pictures, I think that's how it found me. I've always liked photography, visual art, um, etc. But I never really incorporated it into my practice, kind of like in my daily life. And for Burrow Press in particular, I would, I'd do book covers, do event posters, things like that. But I think just having like, as silly as it sounds, like Instagram or whatever, a reason to like take a picture and share it, was something that got me doing it a little bit more often. Um, and I definitely would have never thought that I would take pictures that would end up in a book. That's a whole like different story. Um, but yeah, not just sort of like the having the tool available to easily create was how that happened. And I guess I still am doing it on a regular-ish basis. So
Yeah, you take very interesting photographs.
Yes, his Instagram is nice to look at. Not too bad.
Yeah, it's not like, it's like it has a being. Because sometimes it's other people's are like too curated.
mm,
Or, it's like an intentional, oh, I only do like white background pictures. And it's like,
hmm.
it's a whole art in itself how they do it. But your Instagram page has a soul.
Oh, thank you.
It's a living, like almost like testament of like, oh, this is like a glimpse of how I would be when you met me. When you would
Hmm. Hmm.
So, going to the novel, we feel like only a brilliant mind can write a novella like The Lizard People, and even the story, The Lizard People. How did the story come to you, and why did you feel like this is how you want your second published book would be?
Mm. Um, well, so to answer the second question first, because it's kind of quick, um, I didn't know like when it would be published. I actually had and have, I still have like a longer novel. It's still a short novel, but it's longer than Lizard People. I was kind of shopping that around, so I didn't really know, and I think that might be a common story. Like we all have these projects that we finish and then we try to find homes for them and we never know what order they're going to land in necessarily. Um, and but how it started originally in the writing process was I was still in my MFA, which I did much later in life, so only like a few years ago. Um, and I was like at the residency. It's a low residency program at Atlantic Center for the Arts. I like very much remember being like sitting outside on like they have a lot of boardwalks, and you're kind of surrounded by all these palm trees and saw palms and live oaks and moss. And so it very much kind of felt like a resort. So I think I was a little bit like in the resort mood. I was also reading this collection of short stories for class, The House Guest by Amparo Davila. And they're super kind of weird and moody, and there's some underlying kind of like fabulistic things going on. The supernatural's kind of running through it, but also maybe it's not the supernatural. Maybe it's a psychological expression of the supernatural. Like the supernatural is expressing itself through a character's psyche. So like all these things were kind of coming together, and I wrote this little scene that is like, I think the second scene in the book, like where the narrator is undergoing like hypnotherapy to recover early memories. And I didn't intend to do anything in particular. Like the idea was just thinking about what would happen, if somebody was trying to go back to their earliest possible memory. And in this case, it just kind of came out in the scene through free writing that, the mother has a claw for a hand. And then I had to kind of start making sense of it from there. So usually when I write a book or write a story or a novel or anything rather, it kind of starts with a pre-associative or a free writing process. And then I kind of have to ask myself questions about what I'm actually doing in order to like go to the next thing. And I end up, start building constraints through figuring out who the character is as I go along. And so I decided this character would think he's a lizard person, that he would be delusional. And then obviously I thought of like, I was aware of this like anti-Semitic conspiracy theory about lizard people. So what did that mean? What did it mean that he was like associating himself with this idea? And that kind of really resonated with something that I've been writing about frequently for several years, and is, I think, found in most of my published work, which is whiteness. I started to think about, identity and denial and how that works within whiteness. And around that, this sort of character developed. But I didn't intend to do anything like that at the beginning. It was just like, hey, wouldn't it be weird if I wrote this scene where someone's getting hypnotized, and then it turned into something different, and that's usually how it goes, I think.
Now, for those who have yet to read the book, why don't you give us a little quick synopsis about lizard people so people have a better understanding when we're talking about lizards
and hypnosis.
Yeah, so that's probably a good idea. So yeah, this book is about an unnamed narrator. It's the narrator tells the story in the first person, but they remain nameless, who believes that they are a lizard person. And that is rooted in a kind of childhood trauma, not only, in terms of like a household in disarray, but a household in which the parents are conspiracy theorists, white supremacists. But the narrator doesn't really remember it this way. He's in deep, deep denial and has kind of taken this idea of something he's heard as a child, the lizard people this, the lizard people that, and created his own kind of child logic identity around this idea of a lizard person, and has gone very far in life this way. And so it kind of follows him through flashbacks into how he kind of grew up. But the present moment of the story takes place where he's mandated to do some therapy after an incident happens at work. So the kind of trajectory of the story is he's sent to a resort and is kind of in a back and forth with this therapist who is trying to convince him to, admit who he really is, or accept who he really is, accept that he's not a lizard person. And then there's also a love interest that kind of throws a wrench in things. But for the most part, that's kind of the main premise, I guess.
It's definitely a treat to read this book, especially, given the explanation of this child imagining these things just based off of the conversations that being pulled from the parents. And then we find out later something happens to the dad, and then later on something happens to the mom. So there's never a moment for the main character to ask the question of like, this is what I heard. Is this the right thing? Like, is this the belief that I need to be carrying on? There's never the much needed conversation that needs to happen. And there is this like very quiet undertone of what is really taking place. But it's gets overshadowed by him thinking that he is this lizard, right? And
Hmm.
I was curious in regards to like how you said it was written in first person. When searching for the voice that you wanted to come through on this book, how did you come about wanting us to be in the head of your protagonist?
Yeah, that's a great question actually, and I think I got lucky this time in that first scene that I wrote was in the first person, and as I was starting to kind of figure out what I was actually doing with the story, I quickly realized, which isn't always the case, I quickly realized that it kind of had to be in the first person because the narrator was so delusional and unreliable, um, but also very much a normal person, besides this weird belief that he has about his identity, that like it would be it would almost seem judgmental to do it in the third person. It could have maybe been done in the second person, but what I noticed was happening with the first person was as the narrator keeps coming into contact with people who are not operating under the assumption that people in the world are lizard people, and that kind of challenge his worldview. There was a kind of humor coming out of the sort of like the inability to connect. Like there were people would talk past him, or it would be like people were talking past him. He would just ignore them if if they kind of didn't see it his way, or he would create a kind of rationale to make sense of his lizard identity in this new context if someone was pushing up against you know his belief with reality, and that created a kind of humor. So um, and then I think maybe lastly, and this is something that I can only say usually after the fact when I can have read it a million times and figured out what I'm doing and all that. But I think it also works to humanize him a bit more, um, which I think is important. Like even though I think he's in a way a joke. He's kind of a fabulistic,
Mm-hmm.
morality tale. Um, he's also still a real character, and so I think the first person way in which he recounts some of the things that happened to him as a child kind of balance out the humor that's maybe happening at his expense. So
Other than it just being a thing that you're writing around in your in based off of what you said earlier about how the story began for you, was there anything else that you pulled out from things that you had seen or read that you were like, oh, I'm going to use this as an inspiration for the rest of the story?
yeah, definitely. I think I always have certain like weird writers that have inspired me. And I tend to write weirder things, I think. And so there's always some influence hovering there. Kafka obviously is a big one. But even like a friend of mine who I've published from Burrow Press, like Shane Hinton, writes some really weird shit. I'm always thinking about that. My friend Jared Sylvia writes really incredibly weird short stories. Um, Shirley Jackson, Kobo Abe, like I'm always kind of thinking about them in some way. Um, and even to some extent, like Joy Williams in terms of dialogue. And then I'm always trying to be, um, whether I succeed or not, funny. Um,
You
and I
said
always think about like Paul Beatty and Percival Everett, like those are huge influences. And so that's I think I named my constellation there. And so um, those influences are always hovering. With this book specifically, I was reading those Amparo Davila short stories, which were having an effect on me, in terms of like how to write about one thing, um, while it seems like you're writing about something else.
Mm.
Psychological phenomena, manifestations of trauma, things like that. And then also, like the unreliable narrator, I was thinking about a couple of books I read. One of them's called Down the Rabbit Hole by Juan Pablo Villalobos,
Mhm.
which is an amazing book, also super short, um, about, I think the narrator is 9 or 10, and his father is like a cartel drug lord, and but you see the world through his 9 or 10 year old eyes, and he doesn't he can't quite fully process everything that's going on, and so that gap between the child's perception and then the adult reader's understanding creates a lot of humor. And so I was trying to exploit that gap a lot in this particular novel, between perception and reality, and what the narrator can see but what the reader knows that the narrator doesn't. So that was a big one for sure.
One of the coolest parts of your writing is the performance art aspect of it. For those who follow you, they're familiar with your earlier work, which is Next Door in Colonial Town, and it focuses on your photographs of places around Orlando and pairing them with nextdoor.com posts. And when you do the readings for that book, you incorporate like an entire like slideshow so people can see the pictures that you've taken and the post that you're reading. But for this release for Lizard People, you kicked it up a notch and transformed yourself into a therapist, reading the excerpt from the book, which is a medical write-up for a patient, and complete with a slideshow. What is it for you to treat your readings by giving the audience a full immersive experience within telling this story?
Yeah, I think that my MFA upbringing helped me think about ways to take the words off the page a little bit to justify reading or presenting the work, rather than just reading it aloud, which I think if you're a good reader, and there are lots of them out there, you can get away with that. And whether or not I'm a good reader, I think I also get bored with myself a lot. And so to me, I like the challenge of seeing how a work could be kind of performed, whether it's making it a little bit interactive or adding images, or in this case, kind of embodying a character from the book and creating a kind of, if not a deleted scene, like a little bit of an expanded universe. So the therapist is reading from this paper that appears, a small excerpt of it kind of appears jammed into the book, for reasons that you can read to find out why. And and this is sort of an expansion on that paper. Like, it's the paper he's presenting, not in full, because that would probably be too long of a performance, but about 10 minutes worth of, what I envisioned the presentation looking like. And I think it's also a way with this book in particular, which is very short, I think it's a way to not end up reading like 20 pages of the book and like, half of the book by accident. It's not that short, but but also just a way to talk about the sort of like social aspect of the book, which is whiteness and, the scrutiny of whiteness. And highlight that front and center, because the narrator in the book can't see it. And so much of the book is not consciously doing that. I like the idea of being a little bit more confrontational of it, or with it in the performance. So hopefully it works, and it certainly gets me out of my like reclusive and socially awkward shell to make myself do something like that.
Are we all socially awkward though?
I was wondering, like, when you are putting your works together, be it like a short story that you're writing or writing a book, when you think about the limits that that have been created around what literature is supposed to look like and what you are supposed to do with it, and then testing those limits and saying, okay, like, I want to try something that's totally different. Are you allowing yourself, I mean, this is actually a dumbass question that I'm asking. It's not, you have allowed yourself to push those boundaries, like with the performance art aspect of it. Is that something that you're constantly thinking about when you are putting those things together? Or is it like you say, like, oh, I just want to see what I could create and just do that thing? What is that for you?
Yeah, and that's not a dumbass question. Of course it's not. But it's a really good question because I think that if I were to be thinking about it when I was writing the book or doing the project, it would distract me too much. So I kind of wait until it's done and then see what I have. So that's kind of it happened naturally with the first book. Um, and so this time around, I just kind of did it the same way. I didn't bother to think about, I mean, especially through 80 to 90 to 99% of the writing process, I'm like, this is shit and it's never going to get published. So how could I even think about how I'm going to perform it? But but no, so yeah, I kind of have waited till the end and it becomes a sort of a new challenge, a new project that's related to, but completely different, I think, from the book itself. I think if I thought about it, about a performative aspect while I was writing, it would be too distracting because it's two different things. And I wouldn't want one to sort of influence the other. I want the book to be the book and then the performance to be necessarily based on the book, not necessarily something intertwined. Although I'm open to that in the future, who knows? My process might change at some point.
Like when I saw you perform your stuff, I was like, my expectations have been set so high. So now, like, sometimes I'm like, oh, we just sit and read. Where's the PowerPoint? Where's the costumes? I appreciate the extraness because I like weird shit. Veronica knows about it. I like the side, like the out of the box, like folklore, like magic and all that voodoo kind of stuff. So when I see it in action, it makes me feel like I'm just part of the madness and it's brilliant. So, like if you change your process, I want to be in like the pre-showing show.
Okay.
Hey, sign me up. But yes, it's like so nice to see, and you can feel like you are part, like as a reader, you're part of something, like you're participating in this like reading, or like it's like a two-way conversation immediately, which is because I'm a very impatient reader. That's why I love these things.
Yeah. Well, please give me notes anytime. Like you're my ideal readers, both of you. So, or at least one example of, of the ideal reader. And so, yeah, if you want to call out my bullshit when I'm trying some weird performance stuff, please do.
No,
Or
I'll
tell
be
me when it's
volunteering
working.
as the lizard.
Yeah.
Like that's who I'm gonna be.
Okay, you're my accomplices now. Next, I'm going to keep that in mind. So you heard it first. You volunteered.
I kind of did, didn't I? I consider like, writing and consuming literature now, especially now, like as a form of activism. So the things that you write about are realities of like real people. How did lizard people help you explore certain paradigms that people might not be too familiar with? But these are the paradigms that continue to change the perspective of like people in this country and, help further destroy what we have.
That is a really good question. I think there are a couple of so as I mentioned, the book is on a level like a critique of whiteness, and which is, in my opinion, I guess, and others too, not really an identity, but an ideology that kind of masquerades as an identity. That ideology being white supremacy. But when it manifests as an identity, it's tricky, right? And it's amorphous, it shifts. And so lizard people in particular, I was thinking about a couple of different thinkers in terms of like whiteness studies. The philosopher George Yancey has said that, white supremacy being an inverted epistemology creates massive forms of hallucination. That's paraphrase, I think. And I was thinking also about Charles W. Mills, who wrote about epistemologies of ignorance and this concept of white ignorance, where we have gotten to the point through a sort of this way in which white ignorance is almost created in the same way knowledge is, that he says something like white people are unable to understand the world that they themselves have created. And so,
Man.
which I think rings pretty true. I don't know. When I read those things, it just like, those are, I mean, I obviously I've read more of their work, but those are two just things that like gutted me. I was like, ooh, that's so true. And so thinking about how that can manifest in a story, um, is something I was doing and continue to do, not just with lizard people, but the idea of what happens if someone becomes aware of their own whiteness and what that means. And, you know, and to some extent that's happened to me as well. You know, I'm Latino, but I'm also white. To some people, I'm white presenting. To some people, I'm not. But I'm kind of forced to understand my racialization as white in some ways. Um, and, but I didn't always. And the experience of coming to understand that was extremely powerful. And it's something that, you know, I think about every day, something I have to like deal with and figure out. And it makes its way into the writing. And so, um, all of that said, that all those things very much inform lizard people. And so the character is kind of exploring this idea of what happens when, you don't want to accept the fact that you're racialized as white, and what that means. Because I think there are social consequences to that, that people who are racialized as white need to understand that they are and why they are. And together we should figure out what the hell we're going to do about it. Because that's the actual problem. That's the root of the problem, with racism. And so, in this case, I'm suggesting there's a world like with the different in the therapist's proposal or paper. There's kind of the suggestion that in this world people are kind of figuring it out, and some people are a little bit more far gone than others, and the narrator of Lizard People is one of those really far gone people. And for that reason, I think that was the reason why it came through in this, or I focused on that in the story, just because like it's an extreme example to the point where it's kind of like a metaphor, but it's also absurd and funny, I hope. And I hope that I've started to find points in, I guess in where fiction intersects with my social concerns, where like the absurdity of racism can manifest in kind of like an absurdist, form of fiction, which I tend to like anyway and always have. So I feel like I'm rambling, so I'm just going to stop at that. Yeah.
No,
Thank you for your question.
no, that opens up my like my next question perfectly, because like, we know that you talk about subjects. You're not afraid. Like, you're very brave on the page, which I very much appreciate, about white supremacy, capitalism, and like, racism. Like, you do it in a way where it's like very intentional, but then it's also kind of like, that the funny, how you put it, it's like really funny, to the point that this is like sarcastic humor that I can really appreciate. It's very evident in Lizard People, and you want, the conversation to even go further. So, moving forward, how do you want these conversations to go when talking or discussing about these social political structures, especially from being inspired from reading your book?
Mm-hmm. Ooh, man. I hope that, yeah, I hope that if the message is kind of received and I'm lucky enough to have people read it and talk about it, that, the book just becomes a catalyst for discussion, about, in this case, how much do we as white people deny our whiteness, and what is that doing? To what extent is, white identity a social problem? What will happen to it? I think on like on some level, this book is asking that question, even though it's not explicit. How can we have whiteness without white supremacy? I don't know about that. And in future books, I think I'm trying to be a little bit more, the projects I'm working on now, I think, are a little bit more explicit, about um, about dealing with it. So, the book that's kind of floating in submissions right now is a little bit more allegorical as well, similar to Lizard People. But the two projects I'm working on at the moment, one of them is very much like an exploration of like what it means to be racialized as white through like history. It's kind of an extension of Next Door in Colonial Town, using Orlando and Orlando history as a kind of center for that. And then the other one is still kind of absurdist, but it's kind of dealing with my other half, the Latinidad, and like, what are we going to do about, the Afro-Peruvian leader of the Proud Boys? Like, how does that even make sense? And, how does Latinidad and Latina culture embrace whiteness? And, and that's a little bit more straightforward as well. It's not like a metaphor or like an allegory or anything like that. So I think the work is hopefully becoming just a little bit more blunt. I don't know.
Yes, yeah, because we like blunt, we like in the face, because sometimes, like we as writers, other, you and like among other people, like can put it in like a very, like, oh, we're talking about lizard people, but there's an underlying deeper meaning. And sometimes, it's hard for other people to kind of like pick up on that. And like, bro, we're talking about you, but that's why I think I appreciate your work, because it's like you can see the stark contrast of what Ryan is talking about. I think that is your voice, and I think that's what makes your writing so unique, and we love it. There's no other way to say it.
Well, thank you. I love you guys too. You're amazing.
So I have had the pleasure of coming in contact with your work with Burrow Press by way of There Will Be Words events at Urban Rethink bookstore. It was the first time that I ever seen a publishing house exist in Orlando, as well as being committed to collaborating in numerous ways with other writers in the city. What is it, excuse me, what is the story behind the creation of Burrow Press and the evolution that you've witnessed because of it, and what has been the sustaining power for you throughout all of these years?
Yeah, so back in 2010 or so, I actually co-founded Burrow Press with another writer, Jana Waring, an Orlandoan born and raised. And we were in a writing group and just kind of wanted to meet other writers. Jana was doing creative nonfiction. She also had these cool interview projects that she did. And I was writing short stories, but not really finding, we hadn't found our people yet, and so we were looking for them. And like, rather than do something simple, we just had to just start a press for some reason to like publish other writers in Florida and Orlando. And so the goal of Burrow Press at first was just to do, we didn't know where it was going to go, but we would publish one anthology of short stories by Florida writers. And we had no idea what we were doing at all. But for the most part, it worked out. And it turned out that first anthology ended up publishing about 9 or 10 writers who were not only Floridians, but many of them lived in Orlando. So we're like, well, what do you do when you publish a book? You have a release party, right? And so we had a release party, and the writers came, their friends came. Their friends were also writers. So all of a sudden, like, we met our goal. We met the writers, and I'm sure there are more out there. And as the years have gone on, we've met more and more local writers, obviously. But from that moment, we realized like this was something that Orlando wanted, if not needed. And so a bunch of other local projects spun out of that. So like, we met a writer there who wanted to start a reading series for prose writers, because there was a lot of poetry at the time, which is great. But it was like, oh, let's highlight people who are writing short stories and short nonfiction, or can read excerpts from their memoirs or whatever it might be. And we had a venue for that at the time. That was Urban Rethink. So we're like, let's just do it. I also met Nathan Hollick there, who had an idea to write, to do an anthology, kind of Exquisite Corpse style, about Orlando. So a writer would pick a different part of the city, they would start the story, and then the next writer would pick a different part of the city and continue it. And so that became our next book. That was like, I didn't know what we were going to do next, but it happened at the event that I met the person who was going to spearhead the next thing. And so it became clear that like we could just be a platform for local writers, to publish them online, to publish them in print, to facilitate readings. And so that was really a driving force, and it still is, for Burrow Press. Most of our supporters who are like subscribers every year, a lot of them the majority are based in Central Florida. Then there's like another tier of Floridians, and then another tier of just people who like us who aren't from Florida. But we slowly but surely kind of grew into something that was a little bit bigger and than Florida, and we publish people who aren't just in Florida anymore. And we have for a while, and our distribution got a little bit bigger, and we just generally got a little bit bigger, but we're still tiny, and we kind of maintain that. I maintain that kind of core belief that it all starts with like the community and the people you can see like face to face, and the people who are your neighbors, and in close proximity to you, if you're lucky enough to have that kind of community in Orlando, or in your city. Not a lot of people have that necessarily. So not to poo-poo on online communities, but I think the actual community of your peers, readers, writers, journalists, art critics, bookstore owners, whatever it might be, videographers who want to film your event, designers who want to make the poster. Like, these are the people that I think at the start of the day I'm doing this for, because they're the people in my community, and they make it a place where I want to live and stay. So I think I'm rambling again. So yeah, well, I went back to 2010 and I couldn't find my way back to the present. So.
with Burrow Press, and we asked you this at our first event, what it is to like have to give a rejection letter to somebody that right? But the other side of it is like the editing process. When you're editing the work of someone that what is that conversation like? Have you found it to be like an easy thing, or sometimes does it get a little bit difficult?
I think it's almost always easy, at least in terms of like the communication. Sometimes it can be difficult to figure out what to do, and to kind of work through a problem. But and that is one thing too that I'll add to the previous question, is that like to have the privilege to be able to edit so many great writers has really sustained me and made me want to keep doing it. I've met so many cool people through Burrow Press, through editing them and publishing their work, and people who have become friends, and in some cases very close friends. So that's one rewarding aspect of the whole biz, if you could even call it a biz. And in terms of that, writer editor relationship, I think it's always casual. I think I try to keep it casual, because I try to edit a writer how I would want to be edited, being a writer myself. So it begins with sort of this respect for their vision, the knowledge that it's not my book, it's their book. So always editing with the caveat of, if you're trying to do this, I think you're trying to do this, and if that is true, may I suggest this? But if I'm off base, like, bring me back home and tell me what you're trying to do so we can tweak it to be the most powerful thing that fits what you're actually trying to do. So it's way better than sending rejection letters, for sure. And then the final product, the end product, is extremely rewarding. And I'm just thinking of this now because someone had asked me the other day about like, oh, do you read your books after you write them and they're published? And the answer is no. And that it occurs to me that like the same thing is true of the books that I've edited, because like once, not only have I read them a million times, but I think I've developed like the second most attachment to them. Like I'm the second closest person to that book, and so I cannot bear to look back and see like we missed a typo or something, and copy editors are involved too, and other people are involved. But nonetheless, I cannot I just like to look at the pretty cover, and I don't look at what's
I
inside.
made that too.
I heard from a writer, I don't know who said it, but it was like, if you want to know what type of relationship a writer had with their editor, go to the acknowledgement and look to see where the editor is mentioned. At the very beginning, that was a really good relationship right there. But toward the end, no, that was a bad one.
Yeah. Yeah. And sometimes I don't have to edit barely at all. And especially with poetry, which I don't know a lot about technically, so I really have to go with my gut. A lot of the times I'm just putting a really light touch on the poetry stuff, but if any touch at all. But sometimes it's a lot of work, but it's rewarding work. So, and it helps me, I think, with my own writing. Sometimes I wish it was as easy writing on my own, because as an editor, I can identify the problem and then say, here, you can go fix it, and not have to actually do the fixing, but like the hands-on, the hard work. But no, I think it teaches me a lot. Every new book that I edit teaches me something about how I can improve as a writer myself.
So we consider you as a pillar in the Orlando literary scene. You, I feel like, are a key player in this renaissance that is currently happening in the city. So do you have a vision of what the literary scene would look like for us, despite how our political leaders run the state of Florida? I have to put it in there because it's you.
Yeah.
I can ask you that question.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, I would love for there to be more reading series, at the level that y'all are doing it, more people engaging with books like you all do in your book club and your podcast. Just more of everything. More bookstores, I think it's hard, in a city that doesn't have a lot of infrastructure that's friendly to artists per se, or any working class people. I think it makes it all the more important when someone does create something, and something for a community. It's important when a local writer publishes a book, but it's also important when somebody holds an event or a workshop or something like that. And there's a lot of great people doing that work in all kinds of fields. There's the Kerouac Project with their residencies. There's Raquel Henry has been doing it forever with Writers Atelier, with workshops and resources for writers and write-ins, and just being a great source of support and inspiration. So I am regretting that I started to name people, because now I'm going to forget just as many. But what I would love to see is just more of all of it.
I think more is always great. I
Yeah,
think
it makes
especially,
sense.
yeah, because I think my biggest frustration when it comes to literary events that happen in the state, they tend to kind of just go straight to Miami. No shade to Miami, but there are other places, especially what I've noticed a lot more than ever, things coming out of the Tampa, St. Pete area. Their art scene is thriving over there. It's ridiculous. And I'm like, man, that's how I want it to be over here, where, we don't have to be on this hard hunt to find people to come to read, that there will be just people everywhere that will want to come and read their stuff. And that there are people who want to come and shop their books here, and, do those book tours and stop in Orlando, and hopefully for everywhere else. I know I just heard, which is really cool, that you will be doing a lit fest in Jacksonville. I think the place is a school, arts. Is it Douglas Anderson?
Yeah, Douglas Anderson School of the Arts. Yeah, I'm going to be up there doing a workshop and a publishing talk with an alumni of the reading series of the Midnight Marauders, Michelle Flores.
Yes.
She lives up there.
Yeah. I saw that and I was like, oh, let me look at this. And I'm looking at all of the names of the people. I'm like, oh, there's Disha and there's Dantil. There's a lot of people on this list that I have had the pleasure of talking to, and people we've talked to online. It's just like really cool that that you're a part of this whole affair. So I'm gonna try my best to get up there because I want to see this in person. But are there any other events outside of that you have coming up that you want to share?
Yeah, it's funny that my events in the next couple months are not in Orlando. Yeah, I'll be up there. At the public one, I think that the writing workshop is just for the students, but I'm doing a public talk on publishing and, why to make the best and worst decision of your life and like start a publishing company. Maybe that's what I'll call it that. I don't know. Something like that. And then a week from Thursday, March 7th at Tombolo Books in St. Pete, I will be interviewing the amazing Janine Capo-Crusette, who wrote a great Miami novel, but it's like the great Miami novel of the moment. I'm very excited to talk about Miami with her, being born and raised in the 305 myself and loving the book. And I'm a little bit afraid also that I'm just going to go way into the weeds and all these St. Petersburg people aren't going to know what the hell I'm talking about. And be like,
spirit.
Remember that place? You remember that place on Bird Road? And so you're like,
oh my God,
Ryan, can we please talk about the book? But so yeah, I'm feeling extremely lucky right now to be in such company with those two events. And so yeah, come to Orlando as well, people.
Yes.
I think and I think maybe there's also potential in creating like a larger network of literary Florida too, seeing how we can all put our heads together and connect the communities from Miami to Tampa to St. Pete to Orlando, Jacksonville, etc., Tallahassee, other places that I'm leaving out, I'm sure. So I keep going back to this is the thing where I'm like answering the question 10 minutes later because I've had a chance to think about it. It's like that's the story of my life.
It all boils down to just getting that bright line to connect all of those.
Yes, there we go.
Whoever goes to the bright line needs like a stop of like a book stop here in Orlando.
Yes.
Yeah, bookstores and all the stations.
Yeah, it's you heard
like, oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah. It's like the airport. You buy books in the airport. You buy books at the bright line.
Yeah.
Do you have a plan to like do a short story collection again?
Oh man.
For yourself?
You mean myself, yeah. Yeah, maybe. I think what there's a couple things that I'm writing that are not novels, and so maybe hopefully they don't turn into novels like has been happening lately. We'll see what happens. But yeah, it's more Florida Gothic whiteness horror stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I should have never started looking into Orlando history. Now I can't, I'm just like, I've got like subscriptions to newspapers.com. Like I'm at the freaking history center all the time. It's a real, it's really fun, but it's taking up a lot of my life. And
just
all that history
for the moment.
So the last question of the evening that we give everybody that comes on the show, you have two choices. You can either give us your top 5 favorite books of all time, or the top 5 things that you're very excited about that you want people to know. It could be books, media, anything that you've been consuming lately, whatever of your picking.
Or a combo.
Oh, okay. How about the top 5 books of all time right now in my mind?
There you go.
Okay. So there's definitely I have some favorite authors, and so their books they're in the top 5 automatically. And so one of I think I mentioned all of them already. Like Joy Williams is a favorite of mine. The Quick and the Dead or Breaking and Entering, that's on the top 5 of books. Shirley Jackson, another favorite, and I can't decide whether it's The Road Through the Wall or The Sundial. One of both of those are in the top 5/7. or maybe this is going to turn into 10. We'll see. It's really hard to pick a favorite Percival Everett book. I really like I Am Not Sidney Poitier. Obviously, Erasure just got made into an amazing movie. But he has like 30 novels, and I haven't read all of them. And every time I read a new one, I'm like, oh, this one's my favorite now. So it's just like I can't even. But also,
drop a new one.
Yep. Oh my God, yeah. It's a retelling of Huck Finn through Jim's perspective.
Yeah.
And there's also a really great short story by John Keene called River from Jim's perspective. It's incredible. That's in a book called Counter Narratives, which is like hovering somewhere in the top 10 probably. Let's just put it on the list because since it's right now, right? It's of the moment. And then Yuri Herrera has this amazing sort of unofficial trilogy of an unofficial quote unquote border trilogy. I think my favorite of which is Signs Preceding the End of the World, but also includes the Transmigration of Bodies and Kingdom Cons, like just that whole trilogy. Great, short, amazing novels, which one day my goal is to be able to read them in Spanish and understand them because they're in translation, obviously. But yeah, so that's it. That's the top. I think maybe that was like 11 books, but
you're allowed to do that. Only you, because
oh, thank you.
we love you.
If I keep talking long enough, no one will interrupt me and say, that's not 5. That's not 5. Oh, man.
Well, Ryan, I just want to say from the bottom of our hearts, just thank you so much for coming and talking to us about you and your work and the legacy that you have here in Orlando. It truly means a lot that you have honored our request, and we're so grateful. We're so grateful.
Yeah, I feel like we made it in the Orlando map when we're like, oh yeah, we're talking to Ryan, I don't know you right now. But yeah, like I really appreciate your work. Because I think, in the state that we live in the place that we live in, these works are very necessary because people need to see that not all of Orlando or not all of Florida thinks and acts the same way as the people that run this state. Into the ground. Yes, you're right. So, reading is resistance, and you are one of the people that I really look up to when doing this kind of work. Like, I really appreciate like everything that you do, whether you write, a little short story, a little novella, anything, it keeps me kind of like, it pulls me back to like why we do this kind of thing that we do. Thank you very much.
Thank you for saying that, because yeah, I mean, the respect and admiration is like 100% mutual. And I don't know if your goal was to make me cry at the end of this. You're getting close. But no, like you're doing that work too, reading, organizing around reading, and who we choose to elevate, and promote and platform is important. And so you're like on the front lines of that as well. And whether or not you liked anything I've written, which is a huge plus and heartening, but the fact that you're just doing the work as well, as somebody who's been doing it for a while, you've both been doing it for a while, seeing you out here doing it and organizing, makes me want to keep going too. So thank you for doing what you're doing too, because it's just a love fest over here. Mutual respect. I mean,
that's what you're gonna get when you're talking to two Libras. We're just gonna constantly make you feel good when you leave.
Yes.
We don't like you. We don't like you.
And we love you here. So again, thank you so much, Ryan. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your night, and we cannot wait for whatever else it is that you are getting ready to put out in the world.
Yeah. Thank you, Veronica. Thank you, Denny. I'll see you at the next Vulgar Geniuses reading.
Yes.
4-year anniversary.
All right. Take care.
See ya. Good night.
Good night.